back, my friends, to the Hdshrinkerea podcast, a podcast where we exhume obscure rock and punk and metal, and we put them in one of three categories: the lost, the forgotten, or the should have beens. My name this week is Williams. Kevin Williams.
So formal.
So formal. And that, my friends, is the one and only Mr. Harrison. Robert.
What's going on?
What is going on with you?
Well, it happened again. I set myself on fire.
I'm glad that you waited until we started the podcast before you told me this.
Oh, it's getting to be a routine thing, so it's no big deal. But I mean, I actually wore, look at this. Can you see the hole?
Nice. Yeah, I can see the hole. So
yes,
Robert's showing me
it's
a holy sweater.
Holy sweater.
That is your Sunday sweater now.
This is my Sunday. Well, I thought it was my fire retardant. Fire R word. That it's 100% cotton sweater. So I thought, okay, we're good, because usually it's fire resistant. And I'm sitting there working, welding and grinding, and noticed a little bright light and kind of smelled something at first. I'm on fire, and I just like, oh, that's kind of warm. What's warm? And then I realized I was on fire, so I put that out real quick. But yeah,
did you stop, drop, and roll?
I'm pretty good at this now, so I stopped, and I just kind of put the fire out and went back to work, and was kind of upset that I'd ruined yet another article of clothing by setting it on fire. So this is going in the stack I have in my closet of things that I've set on fire that I may use them one more time. That one time that I know it's going to be ruined, but this is the last time I'm wearing this because it now has a giant hole in it. But I wore it for you just so you could see the evidence of my stupidity.
Well, after you jump in the fire, go listen to Growing Up Rock, the Slamfest podcast, Pot of Thunder, Decibel Geek, Metal Up Your Podcast, The Dummy Room, Podcast Rock City, Cobras and Fire, Rock Strikes 10, Potter Than Hell, History Science Theater, I Love It Loudcast, Ages of Rock, The Synaptic Empire, and don't forget about Monty's Rockcast. Come visit us at Hdshrinkerea.com. Like us, share, recommend, do everything you can do on social media except get pulled off of it. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
It's still my goal. I've yet to be put in Facebook jail, but I know a lot of friends that have, so I may have to try it a little harder.
It's a thing now.
It is a thing. It's like a badge of honor.
It is a badge of honor.
You have to put up Bitcoin for bail money or something like that.
I don't know how that works. So what are we drinking here today? I've got a little of my favorite Dead Guy Ale. What do you have over there?
It's a special night because I'm drinking Modelo Especial.
Especial.
That means special in American.
What is especial about it?
It's got that foil wrapper on it that makes it fancy, but it's also a royal pain in the ass.
I hate those things.
To peel off, and it turns into confetti. It doesn't come off in one piece. So it just goes everywhere. But
it's weird when it gets
if you don't get it,
when you're drinking.
You got to be really methodical about it, because then you get it in your mouth and you're
What's so special and premium about that?
I don't know. Now that we've mentioned it, this sucks. I bet it's good beer, but other than that, it should be called Modelo Penitentious. And that's pain in the ass in English.
I like that. Sounds like a metal band.
Penitentious?
Penitentious. We are Penitentious.
That's our next band. Just one word and a script that nobody can read.
I like it. Yes, it got to be very viney and spiky. And you can't read it, but we know what it is.
Yes.
Oh, man, last week was cool. That was a pretty awesome time. Glad that Tarek got to join us, and I thought his story was so interesting.
It's always cool to learn more about people like that. I've been friends with him for years and still learn more about him. Knew more now than I did a week ago, so it's always fun.
And super cool of him to deal with our pulling something out of the hat, if you will, and he was a good sport about it.
Oh, we didn't give him any prep time. We just kind of said, this is what you're going to do.
And he didn't know what he was going to hear, and he could have hated it. So I'm glad.
But that's kind of fun sometimes.
That is kind of fun.
You got to push if you're not
when it's a band that I love, though.
That's true. Don't offend you.
So I want to continue the seance that we had last week. Is that all right?
Do we have to hold hands again?
I don't even know how to do a seance right now. Let's see. We'd have to light some candles.
It's too bright in here. Let me dim the lights
here. Okay.
It's not very romantic.
So anyway, we're going to just continue on. This is a continuation of last week. This is episode 61, Grave Mistake. The Mission Should Have Been Huge, Part 2. And we talked all about the mission last week. If you didn't listen to that episode, you might want to go check that one out first, because I gave a lot of background on who they are. But basically, two of the guys from Sisters of Mercy left that group in the mid-'80s and formed a band they called the Sisterhood. That didn't go over so well with the guy who was in Sisters of Mercy. They changed their name to The Mission, and they went on and recorded a bunch of really cool goth rock mixed with, I don't know, what would you say? How would you describe it now that you've heard? It's goth, but it's got some little punk edge. It's got a little bit of classic rock.
Talking about the newer version?
Talking about everything you heard last week.
In general. Yeah, I mean, it started off with traditional goth, and then there's bands like The Church that kind of straddle that line. Some of their music is more gothy, but they're just kind of
Echo and the Bunny Man.
Echo and the Bunny Man. Yeah, so they can easily maneuver in and out of of that genre, but are just good rock bands, like the Cult.
Yes.
Cult.
And this band toured with the Cult a lot,
Yeah.
which, again, it was one of those things that I said, the Cult was huge. We know the Cult really well here in the States. For some reason, we don't know the Mission very well.
No,
those two bands played together. Why do we not know?
And maybe just because there wasn't enough room for all that. It was that genre of in-between bands. They weren't as poppy as U2
Right.
or something.
They toured with them, too.
Toured with them, too. But they didn't have the radio hits, it seems like. So maybe that's why. It was a smaller grouping of bands in that genre, so there was just not a lot of room.
Yeah, and I have a feeling, I wasn't one of the goth kids, but I have a feeling that the goth kids, while they may have liked them, they probably did the whole, you're not goth enough because you're doing this other stuff.
And compare them to Bauhaus and Peter Murphy, all that stuff that's really gothy, that embraced the look and everything else. That there's more to it than just having a little bit of that sound.
And I mentioned last week that I have this amazing book that came out in 2014. It's called At War with the Gods. It's the whole history of the Mission. And had I read that, I could have told you all sorts of little nuggets, but I haven't read it yet. So it's still sitting on the nightstand by the bed.
Yep.
At one point, I'll pick it up.
Set your beer on it.
It's an amazing coaster that costs $35. Okay, so when we left off, it was 1994. I was still in college. I got this album called Sum and Substance, and it was a greatest hits. And I had not heard from the band in 2 years, so I immediately assumed that the band were no longer around, and that was probably it. So they had a good run of albums in the 80s through the early 90s, and this is probably it. Now, I was cool with that because they had enough of a discography that I could go back and hear things that I hadn't heard. Because when I got Sum and Substance in 94, I had only come in 90, so I only had the albums from there out, and I didn't know those other albums until I got the greatest hits, and I was like, oh, I need to go back and get these other albums. So I was cool with that. Now, I also mentioned last week, had I read the liner notes that came with the CD,
Cliff notes, basically.
Yeah, I would have read that they had not broken up, that the songs that I thought were just extras on the disc were actually new songs that were going to be on their next album, and they had new members. And, I read that maybe 10 or 12 years later and went, well, that would have opened my eyes, wouldn't it? So what happened with me is I thought this band was gone, and because of their major label deal ending with that greatest hits, that was their final thing that they had to deliver for the record company, I guess, and, it was a major, so that's the reason that we could get it in the States. Their next two albums in the 90s, it was kind of one of those import situations where, unless you were really looking for it, you weren't going to find it in a store. And I was just not, they weren't on my radar. We were in the internet world by that point in time, but they just were not on my radar. I thought they were done. So I didn't even know about their next two albums. I didn't know about the band again until 2001 when they put out an album, and I was just recently getting into iTunes and iPods. It had just come out, and I found this album by the Mission UK, and I've never seen this one, and it's brand new. So, but that was 2001. So go back and do a little digging, like, oh, there are other albums I missed apparently, like the one in 95 and the one in 96. So we're going to talk about those first two albums.
The forgotten albums.
And they're really hard to find. For me to get the physical copies of these, I had to get imports, and I had to get it from, it wasn't even on iTunes back 10, 12 years ago, but I'm sure it is now, but it was really hard to find these. So that was one of those import purchases I had to do. So in 95, after the Sum and Substance album came out, one of those songs ends up on this album that they put out called Neverland. And it's, like I said, it was on an indie. It was, I think, distributed maybe through a major, but it was on an indie label. It's still, in the UK, it still did pretty well. It was still number 58 for them to kind of be in that period of time where bands that had been around in the 80s didn't really know where they were going to land. You remember that time because everything had just been turned upside down with all the new bands coming out and the music changing.
Brave New World.
So this is basically a new version of the band, and it's still Wayne Hussey, the singer, guitarist, and the drummer Mick Brown. Now, when I say that name, and some people listening to this podcast may think, Mick Brown, that's the dude from Dokken. No, that's Wild Mick Brown. This guy's not wild. This is just Mick Brown, the Englishman who's the English gentleman.
This is tame, middle-of-the-road Mick Brown.
Wild Mick Brown is in Dokken, and he's American. So there's your difference.
Well, I was wondering that myself. I'm glad
I know it was going to come out.
That.
I knew it was going to come out.
Wait. Okay.
There are only two guys from the original band. Craig Adams, the bass player, had left, and Simon Hinkler, who was the guitarist, he had also been replaced. And he was replaced by a guy named Mark Gemini Thwart, who would go on to be this kind of hired goth gun. He would play in all the goth bands. He was kind of the go-to guitarist.
He had that sound down to science.
He played with Peter Murphy and a bunch of other goth groups after his stint in the Mission. So it's kind of cool. So they had a very different sound, let's just say. They were exploring, when we last listened to them in the early early mid 90s, they were getting into this kind of poppy alternative area, and they sort of continue that, but they also did what a lot of bands did in 95, which was, how do we go darker, maybe heavier, to maybe get some of the kids to like it.
Don't use the word grunge. Grungier, dirtier.
I mean, you listen to this and you tell.
Okay.
Because that's kind of the sense I get, but at the same time, it's a goth interpretation of, we need to get, and maybe they were competing with some of the bands, the contemporary goth bands that were going heavier as well. Everything was getting heavier and sludgier.
That was a good time.
I really liked it.
That was a good time.
That was our time. Yes. So we're going to start with this song from Neverland, and this song is called Sway, which happened to be one of my band's first
wait
names.
a minute.
Yeah.
Is that an influence?
Not at all, because I didn't discover this until much later.
Okay.
This is a forgotten album for me. It's called Neverland, and this is Sway from 1995.
But
That actually made me think of a few years before that, more along the lines of, and oh God, you're going to laugh at this, Queensryche and Dream Theater, without the incessant noodling all throughout the song. So if you take away some of the show-offness that Dream Theater and Queensryche had, and I say that in all due respect because these guys are amazing, but that's one of the things that I always kind of roll my eyes is they prove the old adage, just because you can do something doesn't mean you always should. Their songs were full, start to finish. They got their money's worth as far as notes.
Yes, they did.
But anyway, but that vibe, that it was just cool. They had the speaking vocals in it you couldn't quite make out. It was more like a movie soundtrack song, something you'd hear in a movie. It didn't sound like a radio single, but it was close. The guitar sound, that was very obvious mid-90s, and it's funny to think of that. I couldn't describe it.
A new guitarist, right? So a definite change from where they had been before, even though Wayne Hussey he plays rhythm guitar as well. But yeah, taking out Simon Hinkler and putting in some new blood, definitely the sound. And I think sonically that album sounds so good. I mean, everything was separated perfectly. Yeah. They were getting back to basics in the sense that before this, they were throwing everything they could into their mix.
It was very produced. And all the gimmicks.
This is stripped back almost a little too much for them, actually, because the vibe I was getting, it's interesting what you said. I was getting a true, the riff, I mean, it just sounds like a Jimmy Page, Zeppelin, something from Physical Graffiti.
And they'd had that influence.
And they had that before.
But this is more, instead of the keys and the sitars, this was just a direct,
the
Jimmy
guitar
Page
riff. Yeah. The other vibe I was getting, and I'm thinking 95, it makes a lot of sense, and I don't know if they were listening to this band, but it made me think of Live. So Live's third album was called Secret Samadhi, and it was a darker Live album after throwing Copper, but for some reason
it didn't have the radio hits that the first.
It still had some, but it's my favorite Live album because it's dark and kind of nasty, and for them, I love.
Is that the one?
Yes,
Lakini's.
Yes.
Oh God, that's where I just turned off. Went, okay, I'm not into this band as much as anymore.
So I was totally into that album, and then they go and sing about the dolphins crying. God, you lost me.
Well, I mean, they do have the most depressing song ever written.
Which one is that?
The baby dying.
Oh yeah.
God, I mean, let's just take all the mother dying in one verse, the baby dies in another one, childbirth and going horribly wrong. Yeah, that song is the quick channel change. If I hear that, I've heard it too much, and it puts me straight into a bad mood. Wow. I can't listen to that song anymore. But I'm like, hey, you know what? Hats off. You as an artist did exactly what you wanted to do. You wanted to express a feeling and an emotion. You did that perfectly. I'm sorry. That song is god-awful depressing now, and I can't listen to it anymore.
So there's depressing songs that make
Lightning
I think it's
Lightning Strikes. Okay, make sure I have the name right.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's been a while. But yeah, so I was kind of getting that live from tonality of the guitar and everything else, that kind of vibe.
But it's funny to think how common that tone was. Injected, all the bands that we listened to, that, and I'd love to replicate that. I love that tone.
Oh my God, Injected's tones. Those guitars are so thick.
Just perfect.
Stuck Mojo.
Yeah,
man,
it's Stuck Mojo too. Yeah, and then once again, that was about that same time frame.
That was the same year that I discovered.
Was everybody
Stuck
calling
Mojo.
each other up going, hey man, okay, take Marshall Stack and do this, turn it to this, and use this type of guitar and these strings and da-da-da-da.
Yeah, they had it dialed in for
Nobody
sure.
called me. I still sounded like crap back then. So.
Yeah, so that was kind of the vibe I was getting there. I think they were trying to, they were living in the time, and I think they were trying to maybe grab on to what was going on in 95, but they definitely, the only thing that makes that goth are the lyrics. I don't know if you listen to the lyrics, but you talked about crows and all sorts of things that are very gothy, very graveyard.
Except Dio talks about rainbows, then goth people talk about crows.
They're going to talk about crows and black and dark and everything. Yes. So the lyrics are still there. It's just the music to me is complete 180 from where they started. That kind of that sparse, let them sing the verse, and then you come in with a big chorus, and then you drop it back out, and very atmospheric in the beginning and the end. You have intros and outros. This is more of just them rocking, which it was cool. It was, I'm sure for them, it was trying to be of the time. But I don't think Wayne was that happy with the direction they were going, because he actually worked on the next album as quickly as he could to get out of the contract. He had a 2-album deal with this indie. There could have been something business-wise going on that he wanted out of it, but he put the next album together very quickly. So it came out a year later. It's called Blue. And he is noted as hating this album with the exception of one song, which they play in concert to this day, and it was a re-record of a song that they had begun in 86. So that's the only reason he likes it, is because I guess anything that came out in 96, he just was not on board with this album. And this is another one that was so hard to find. I had to get an import of this as well just to get the CD, and I'm sure now you can just download it or stream it, but this was only like 10 years ago when I tracked this thing down, so it was hard. And this would be Mick Brown's, not Wild Mick Brown, this would be Mick Brown's last album with The Mission. So he's the original drummer. This is his very last album. He will not come back to this band. And really, this band would dissolve after this album. So even though I wasn't aware that these were out, had I been aware that these were out, I would have totally thought that they were done after this one, because they kind of were.
Yeah.
But I'm going to play the one song that Wayne Hussey actually likes. And it's a bit of a ballad, so it's kind of back to that gothy, but it's kind of a goth ballad. So this is Evermore Again, which originally was written 10 years earlier, and they re-recorded it, rearranged it. So check this out. From Blue, 1996.
I can feel your breath. I can feel the shivers running down my spine. I can feel your heartbeat. I can feel your hand. I can feel your fingers dancing down my spine. I give myself to you, heart and soul, flesh and blood. I can feel your heat. I can see the fire burning in your eyes. I can taste your sweetness. I can feel your joy. I can see the flames dancing in your eyes. I give myself
will not part them.
This body.
Death will not part them.
So I am going to need a copy of that is at your earliest convenience, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because I was thinking of some ladies that if I were to play that in the right situation, they would be very happy. And when the ladies are happy, everybody's happy. Yeah, that's a getting down to business song right there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
For certain. No, that's not across the board, that's no, I'm not going to say.
That is...
that song right there is sexy as hell.
Yeah, and it's creepy. It's
creepy.
He brings the goth back
yes, it
into
does.
it. And
that's why I like it.
Yet it's like you said,
a lot of candles.
Kind of sexy at the same time.
Set myself on fire again. They love it when I set myself on fire. That really turns them on. But no, I was trying to imagine kind of clicking back and forth between 96 and 86. And the song was started in 86 and trying to pick different elements. And I couldn't, obviously the lyrics to the 1986 version of the band, how different would it have sounded?
Well, they actually recorded it, so they
do have a recording. I thought you said they just started it. Okay.
Well, it was called Forever. I think it was called Forevermore, and this is called Evermore and Again. So they manipulated, reimagined it.
Okay, okay. So then it wasn't just a work in progress; it was the actual song. They still obviously written in a time that to me seems very different between the 80s and the 90s.
Well, the obvious thing were the drums were very 96. Super 96 program drums. And then you had your guitar leads, which was a lot of feedback, which I loved.
Yeah.
But that was very 96.
Yeah, that was not 80s would have been a little janglier.
There would have been more notes.
Yeah, chorusy.
But I love the song.
That's amazing. I can see why he liked it.
So that's the only thing from that album that
so
will
you
play.
got to copy that for me.
I will get that
I'll
to
remind you again later, just so you don't forget.
So again,
we got nothing else better to do these days.
Yeah, you need that going on in your life. So that was 96. They did a really short tour with this album, only I believe in the UK and maybe some of Europe. And then Hussey said, we're done.
And that's a wrap.
And that's a wrap. So Mick Brown moved on, the original drummer. The guitarist, like I said, went on to be in probably 10 other goth bands. And I'm not really sure what happened to the bass player, but Wayne Hussey decides to move to Orange County with his wife and his kid.
Because that's the gothiest place you could possibly move is Orange County.
He's a Hollywood vampire, I guess. So yeah, he moves to Orange County and he enjoys retirement. And around 99, so it took him about 4 years, he had been doing some acoustic versions of Mission stuff and putting that out, but it was more just online type of stuff, no real releases. He had done, I believe, a solo album, but in 99, he resurrects the original band and decides to try to get everybody back together. And in 2000, they were headlining festivals with Sisters of Mercy. So
nice.
It came full circle.
That's good.
So you've got the two guys that had left Sisters of Mercy in 1985, formed the Mission, and you have those guys and Andrew Eldritch and his then whatever version of that band that it was. But you had the two bands touring together for the first time, which is kind of cool doing festivals.
It was a hell of a show too.
Yeah, I bet. And they were focusing on just the era that really put them on the map. So they were only playing songs from 86 to 90.
Playing the hits.
Playing the stuff that the people really loved, right? Nothing from the newer stuff and nothing from Mask, which is that weird album that we heard last week. But I actually went back this week and listened to it, and I do love it. I think it's just different. That's all. But so they did that for a while, and you don't really hear anything else other than the Missions touring, doing what legacy acts do. They go out and they tour, and they mostly promote the stuff that had gotten them to that place in the first place.
Right.
And then I heard that they were in the studio, because at this point I'm actually using the internet appropriately and finding things out. And so we get an album, my first purchase of theirs that I got, I believe it was on iTunes. And it's an album called Aura. And the cover looks classic Mission UK. The songs on it sound very classic. So this is them getting back to their roots. And it's a fantastic album. So I'm going to play, I believe this is the first track of the album. It just sets it up perfectly to be one of those Mission UK albums that could have come out in the 80s. Check it out. This is Evangeline from Aura, 2001.
is the mystery of masks and of veils. And she bestows ecstasy in the torture that she sells. She'll bind you blind and make you bleed for love and mercy on your hands and knees. She'll make you scream and beg for more. She'll put the pain inside you that you adore. Evangeline, Evangeline, kiss the spike of her Louis XV. Evangeline, Evangeline, bow down and worship the whiplash queen. Evangeline. She's versed in practice well, in the art of discipline. She's cursed as a Jezebel, goddamn even the original sin. It's such a thin line between heaven and hell. She walks it fine and she knows it well. She'll make you feel more than you've ever known. She'll make you show more than you've ever shown. Evangeline, Evangeline, kiss the spike of her Louis XV. Evangeline, Evangeline, bow down and worship the whiplash queen. Evangeline. Bow down before me on your hands and knees. Take the pain you deserve, and I will release. And you will surrender, and you will obey, and you will serve in every way. Bow down before me, and you will believe. I will bestow, and you will receive. And bow down before me on your hands and knees. Take the pain you deserve, and I will release. Evangeline, Evangeline, kiss the spike of her Louis XV. Evangeline, Evangeline, bow down and worship the whiplash queen. Evangeline, Evangeline, kiss the spike of her Louis XV. Evangeline, Evangeline, bow down and worship the whiplash queen. Evangeline.
That wasn't graphic at all. Yeah, so that was a one long euphemism and double entendre, maybe a triple entendre.
They're back.
Whiplash Queen, yeah. Very 80s content.
Yes, yes. So
Queen of polishing trailer hitches.
So I heard that album and I'm like, oh man, they are back in full force. They sound like themselves again.
The sound went back to
It went to that
sound?
1990 sound to me. That's,
90, okay. I was still had a little more jangly to it, so I like the less distorted version of them too.
Yeah, so they got the bass player back in that recording, and I believe it's still the newer guitarist, but they had gotten back to their roots, and that album's great. If you like their early stuff, you'll like that album as well. And so I got this album, and this is when I realized, like, oh shit, there were 2 albums released in the 90s that I didn't even know about. And so that's when I started going back again and trying to hear those albums.
It's fun to have surprise discoveries like that.
It is. That kind of stuff doesn't really happen now.
No, because
it's just too easy to see the whole discography somewhere.
Yeah.
If you remember when iTunes first came out, it was very selective. And even Amazon and other digital services, it was very selective.
Well, nobody knew what to do with it. They didn't know, do we sell our soul? Do we do this? I mean, there's illegal downloads were happening. That was all the rage.
Yeah, that was going on. So I don't know the whole Napster thing. People were file sharing, but the iTunes of the world, you may get the 2 albums that sold the best, and you don't get anything else by them.
They didn't have discography.
They weren't putting the whole discography on. So that's why back then, even if you could download it, you weren't really finding everything that you were looking for unless you did some kind of torrent or Napster or whatever it was.
Torrent. Oh my God.
Somebody shared it with you. Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember our friend Eric pulling me aside one time saying, "Are you getting stuff off torrents?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You need to stop." He's like, it's going to go down bad. And sure enough, a couple of years later, all those torrent sites were stripped, and some people got sued. And
I remember the lawsuits to like housewives and Burbank and soccer moms getting sued because their kid had downloaded a bunch of stuff on their account.
Right.
Yeah, that was not a good time.
Yeah, I'll never forget Eric telling me that.
That was good.
He had never said anything to me other than destruction. So that was the first time it was like, that wasn't a destructive comment. It was actually a warning to do something legal.
Sanity cleared.
Oh, man. Missed that guy.
Yeah, just tip one for him.
Yes, absolutely.
Not really. I don't want to clean that up. But
let's just drink to Eric. Here's to
Eric, yes.
All right. So that was 2001. They do the Legacy Act thing, which is even though you've put out a new album, you're going to tour on that just a little bit, and then you're also going to play all your old stuff for 10 years until you do something else. And that's kind of what they did. They toured a lot. They didn't really put anything out new for a while. Now, in 2006, they celebrated 20 years, and I believe they got the entire original band minus the drummer to come back, and that's when they did more of a celebration of certain albums and things like that. They were doing those sorts of tours. And then right after their 20th anniversary, 2006, they released this big anthology. So there's that if you want to go get an even broader greatest hits. It covers more than the one I mentioned last week. They dropped a message that 2007 will be a new album for Mission again. So awesome. 6 years later, we get another album. And this is a massive, at least in the US, it had extra tracks. It was a massive 18-track album. So it's basically a double album. And it's called God is a Bullet. And it's another one that, it's so them. It's really, really good. They did 4 nights headlining in Shepherd's Bush in London on this tour. So they were back as a touring force.
I'm taking it that's in an arena or something?
That's an arena.
Okay,
yeah.
I've just clarified.
That's
some farmer's backyard out in the bushes.
They were out in the bush.
Yeah,
they were in Australia in the bush. No, they toured the UK, Europe. So from a touring standpoint, this band was back, and they did a DVD of the tour from this album, and it went to number 6 in the UK. So big accomplishment for a band from the 80s to do that this late in the game, which is 2007. So I'm going to play a song from God is a Bullet, which is really hard because again, it's got 18 tracks on it. So
hard to pick.
There's a lot of good stuff, but this one has the coolest title, and this is the one I'm going to play. It's called Hdshrinkerea.
Chosen mode of attack. things you say, give it all away. And the things you do, perpetrated you are Hdshrinkerea. And the things you preach, run and reach, it flags the race, sets me ablaze. And the things you say, give it all away. And the things you do, perpetrated you are Hdshrinkerea.
They don't understand the concept of a fade out, do they?
No, they do
Every
not.
single damn one of their songs is like da da da, and we're done. Catches me in the middle of a drink each time.
Yeah.
I like to have a little notice when their songs are ending, so I'm ready. I like to be professional, and yet keep fucking with me. His voice sounds great, but I can definitely tell a difference as somebody's been in the business as he has been in the business. Yeah, at that point, 20-something years. A
little grittier.
Little gritty. It's got a little more Lemmy in them.
Yeah, a little grittier, but still.
But still sounds great. I mean, it's just interesting. Like I said, for a band that's been in the business and a band that's been in the business making songs that are similar in the sense that they have a style. Versus there's other bands like U2 that went way, way, way like with disco tech and all these other stuff off the charts, and then kind of came back later on.
Right.
But still, like they've got a style and a method to their songs, and it's good.
And I think from a reviewer's standpoint on some of the things I read about this album, God is a Bullet, that was some of the criticism was that it sounded a little too similar to what they had done in the past. But to me, this is the mission being the mission.
Yes.
They've experimented. We've come back.
They didn't
now.
go as, like I said, they didn't go as far as other bands have gone when they get bored and start going in weird. Like Led Zeppelin, for instance, never had a chance to do that. They were around. They experimented.
I actually don't like their last two albums nearly as much. But
yeah, at that point, they hated each other and were all, heroin addicts. But other than that minor point,
right.
But if they had kept going for 20 years as opposed to 10 years,
right.
They would have gotten bored and experimented, and who knows, which direction they would have gone.
Right. But to me, and what makes this so powerful when I listen to this album is it illustrates or I guess I should say, it brings back that feeling of what I love about this band, what hooked me from the beginning. It's Wayne Hussey's voice, his songwriting style, so the chords he chooses to use with his voice, and Craig Adams' bass playing. Those two guys together just create this amazing original sound that makes them the mission.
Yeah, because in this particular genre, in this particular band, the bass is more important than
bass is
a lot
very
of rock
heavy
bands
in
where you
goth.
don't
Yeah.
even pick out the bass because there's so much guitar or screaming vocals that the bass is just there on stage, but you don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's very important in goth to have a bass that is kind of the driver. A lot of times the verses are driven only by drums, by the rhythm section.
It gets so
the drums
open,
and the bass.
and not quiet,
Because you need
open.
that space to give that
Yeah,
creepiness.
space. It's got a lot of space, exactly.
Yeah. And they get back to that. So this album is brilliant. I don't care what people say if they think it's a little samey. To me, it's just them in their sweet spot.
Yeah.
Now, they would kind of divert from it a little bit with their next album. So the original band, again, is together minus the drummer. They start doing classic songs from the old times. They're doing all these tours. And, that album, again, came out in 2007. They continue doing the whole celebration of their past legacy act deal for the next several years. And they did a all over the world tour. They became a touring force, basically. They became a live band known for their playing live, not so much even their albums. It was more about, this is a band you go see. Unfortunately, they didn't come to North America that often, but apparently they did on this one tour in 2013, and I had no idea.
Yeah, we weren't in the wheelhouse for that.
Didn't know about it, and I hate that I missed that. If they came anywhere close to here, I'm not sure. I didn't look that up, but I don't remember ever hearing about them coming in our area. Maybe they only played the West Coast. But anyway, they toured all over the world in 2011, 2012, doing shows with them and the Cult. And again, they were doing their celebration period of playing 86 to 90. They were playing that music that's so good. Because, they're celebrating being together for so long. So that's what a lot of these bands do. But they did end up taking some time off in 2012 and putting together a new album. And in 2013, we got an album called The Brightest Light. And you can still get this, I believe I got it on Bandcamp at the time, or maybe Bandcamp wasn't around. I'm trying to remember what site it was, but it was one of those sites where you could pre-order, and I pre-ordered this vinyl, and it's one of those albums that half of it sounds like them, and the other half is like, I don't know what they were trying to do. It's an odd album, but there are definite nuggets on it, and there are definite things on it that sound like what they'd done the previous album, but I'm not sure what they were going for with it. By the next album, they fall back into who they are. But so it's a little odd of an album, but I am going to play the title track from it, which is really awesome. It's called Sometimes the Brightest Light Comes from the Darkest Place. That is so goth.
That's tagline of gothism.
Grape and cooling board away. Take the bunting down, I ain't leaving town today. The choice is yours, and so is the consequence. You don't win no medal for sitting on the fence. Sometimes a warm smile comes from the side of his face. Sometimes the brightest light comes from the darkest place. Death never takes the wise man by surprise. But who here on earth can call themselves wise? The whispers in my ear, my halo is aflame. It's too easy to look for someone else to blame. Sometimes the weakest man fights with the strongest faith. Sometimes the biggest prize comes from the shortest race. Sometimes the slightest sigh fills up the biggest space. Sometimes the brightest light comes from the darkest place.
Wait,
You're not ready
I wasn't
again.
ready. I was like way over there.
You know how they end.
Sons of
At
bitches.
any time.
Yeah, I just got to stand in one place. I can't move. Can't drink.
How'd you like the goth blues?
I didn't.
No, it wasn't your thing.
Not my thing. It wasn't gothy enough, and that's kind of why I like them. Is the gothy side.
Mm-hmm.
Once it gets past that, and it's just kind of that could have been Gary Moore, Gary Wright. I'm thinking no, that's Dreamweaver.
Some Gary,
blues player Gary. There's going to be 3 people that get this reference, but the very beginning of that song was a complete ripoff from. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
The Captain and Tennille, Love Will Keep Us Together. Theirs was electric piano, and this was a guitar thing, but that dun, 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 dun. I completely thought of that
Wow.
the first time, and that threw me off, I think. So once I'm thinking of Captain and Tennille, I can't go back to really this because, Captain and Tennille, where it's at. So there's about 3 or 4 people that will know what I'm talking about. And if not, YouTube, the Captain and Tennille, and you will understand what people were doing in the 70s.
Anyone who's ever been to a dentist office has probably heard that song.
Very elevator yacht rock music extraordinary.
That's a yacht rock gold standard.
Gold. Everybody's got to know that one. So that
didn't come to my mind, but thank you for putting that in my head. I appreciate
You're welcome.
that.
That's
so
what I'm
now
here
every time
for.
I listen to that, that's what'll happen.
completely ruin everything. I'm the ruiner.
See, I got a real Rolling Stones vibe from that.
Ooh.
And the guitar is just so kind of that, it almost sounds like the 80s Stones stuff where it was kind of that, not quite bluesy, but it's them trying to be modern blues kind of sound. So that's what that sounded like a lot to me. So yeah, like I said, that album's a little interesting, not an essential album by them. A little disappointing, yet still kind of cool. But their next album.
Uh-oh.
So if you remember last week, we talked about the albums and the songs that we love the most. They were produced by one guy named Tim Palmer. And he came back in 2016 to do their 11th album to celebrate their 30th anniversary.
Was he like 96 years old at this point?
No, he's of their age, I believe. So they're in their 50s, 60s. I don't know.
Old. God, that's
Old guys. Like, oh, wait.
Old.
So
Shut
are
up.
we.
Shut it.
Yeah, so they put out this album, Another Fall from Grace, 3 years after the one we just heard with Tim Palmer at the helm. And it was a crowd-funded pre-order thing as well. So I got, this is so geeky.
You invested.
I invested, and I got the vinyl, the signed vinyl.
Whoa.
So I got the signed vinyl. It came before it was released to everyone else.
That's a good investment.
It's called Another Fall from Grace. It was their first top 40 UK album in over 20 years.
And that sets them in a pretty small group that has hits that far apart from each other.
Yep. So this put them back into the charts in the UK. Obviously, here in the States, we know nothing of this band.
Birds chirping. We're listening to what kind of crap were we listening to at this point?
2016? Well, that wasn't that long ago.
I know. That's way back 5 years ago. I don't remember that far.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll explore that next week so we can remember what we were listening
What
to.
Robert was doing 2 weeks ago. Let's talk about that. I don't remember.
Yeah, so they put out this album. It did really well. They had several singles from it in the UK, and they were back onto their touring schedule, and they toured through 2017. I thought it was interesting. Their last couple of dates were done with Alice Cooper. That would be an interesting mix.
It's kind
See
of both
Cooper.
dark.
Yeah.
I don't see him as Alice Cooper as goth, but it fits in with goth. It's
His
rock
image,
and metal.
His image
Yeah.
totally is goth.
And the stage is more macabre horror
Yeah.
versus just goth.
His is a little more
How would you say?
campy.
Campy theatrical.
Yeah.
Goth holds back.
Goth
a little
wouldn't
bit.
have the camp.
They
in it.
imply that. They're like,
Right.
yeah, I look like I could cut your head off, but I'm not going to do it on
Right.
stage.
I'm going to cry instead. So
That's
after
Robert Smith. Oh, I'm going to kick. No, I'm not going to kick your ass.
I'm not going to kick your ass, but I am going to cry on
I'm
you.
really sorry. I got mad at you. Oh, God.
So they took a break after 2017, after that last tour, and they were supposed to tour last year in 2020.
Oops.
Yeah, that didn't happen. So
That
apparently
means...
Apparently, it's been moved to this year.
Okay.
So
plane ticket to go to what's the closest
depending
you think?
on pandemic and where they go and if they go, I would definitely consider investing in trying to go see them.
Okay, sign me up.
So we will see what happens.
As long as they don't play that last song, just say hey.
No, I don't think they'll be playing that.
Okay, good.
I don't think they'll be playing
I'm buying
anything
a plane
from that
ticket.
album.
That's when I'm going to get a beer if they pull that song out.
But they might play this one. This is called Tyranny of Secrets from Another Fall from Grace 2016.
I'm ready. Right here. Ready to go. I didn't move.
It was an abrupt ending, though.
Yeah.
Another one.
That sounded good. See, that depends on their mood, I guess.
That's them in the zone.
They're
this
really
whole
nailing
album,
it. Yeah.
That album is so good.
That's what I expect when I hear Mission.
Yeah, that is the sweet spot of the Mission. This song that came out in 2016 encapsulates everything that they are to me. Tyranny of Secrets It's a great goth title as well.
30 years in the business.
Yeah, 30 years in. And they're still going. And his voice, a little bit grittier, but he's still got it.
And he thankfully doesn't hit too many really high notes. It goes up there, but he's able to reproduce it. And like a lot of other singers that made their name on those operatic sounds that none of them can hit anymore.
You know, you bring up a good point. I think if you start off as a baritone singer,
down there a little bit,
you can go longer with that voice because that's what happens to your vocal cords anyway. You get lower. So, I never really thought about that. But that's why those guys who are in that register can maintain more so than somebody singing alto.
That concert I told you I saw on YouTube of Led Zeppelin concert 77, I think, that Plant was taking all the songs down an octave, just like you would have thought of somebody like Vince Neil, in
Paul Stanley.
Paul Stanley. Oh, bless his heart. But I was amazed that and it was the last show of that particular tour, so I'm pretty sure he was just worn out. It wasn't an age thing, obviously, but I was surprised. I was expecting Robert Plant, and I got Robert Plant 20 years in the future unexpectedly. Right. But if you're starting off without hitting super high notes, your voice doesn't change that much. Like I said, it's a little grittier. You can just tell this dude's 30 years older. It happens.
Yeah, totally.
Who knows if he smokes and drinks too?
Good.
It still sounds. And if you're a goth genre type band, it adds a little something too. Yeah,
it does. Yep. And he rocks it out a little bit more too. So you get. He's singing a little grittier than maybe he did in the early 80s.
He's just more comfortable
because
with it.
he wants to put that into it. He's trying to rock a little bit harder maybe than they did when they started. So that's what I have here. That is the Mission. And man, I just want to thank you for putting up with that. This is one of those bands that they're one of my bands, that nobody knows about them and they're mine. And when I talk about them, I'm really passionate about them. I've never seen them live. I would love to. I just think the most of mainly Wayne Hussey, just his writing, his singing, just the way he plays. So thanks for putting up with it.
Yeah, no problem. And I hope we can figure out a way to work in some other goth-oriented bands. Once again, this is something that's percolated over the last few months.
It's new on your horizon,
Oh,
right?
very new. I had heard the 4 or 5 most popular goth songs. Once again, you name them.
Which again, we covered in episode 49.
49.
Go back and listen to that.
Thank you. But all the hits. I've heard those, but I didn't gravitate towards those. I didn't shy away like, I hate this stuff. I just didn't delve deep into it. But once we did those episodes, then all of a sudden, like a lot of other stuff, I started listening closer to it and then seeking it out. And that's what I've done recently is seeked out a little bit more of this, a little more in depth, not just the hits. Okay, what is their second, third, fourth song on that album that I would also like? And so that's the fun part of this whole podcast. It's opened me up to a lot of new stuff, but this is one specific example of me going, oh, you know what? I probably would have liked that 25, 30 years ago. I just didn't have the open mind to sit down and listen, or the influence like you to go, hey, you would probably like this.
Right.
That's awesome, cool to have now.
That's great. And the good thing about goth music is there are a lot of B, C, and D bands.
Yeah.
And we here at Hdshrinkerea, that's what we love. That's our bread and butter. So we will definitely revisit this again in the future.
It's not just for Halloween anymore.
Exactly. It's what the other vampires eat.
Yes, rest of the year.
All right, man. Well, we're getting out of here. We'll see you next time on Hdshrinkerea. Anything else from you, Robert?
I'm going to go change out of this burnt out sweater and try not to replicate that for another 6 months.
Sounds good. See you later.
See you.